So in mid-April, I received a text from my good friend and bikepacking buddy Dana Ernst reading, "Want to join me in Iceland at the end of June to ride the Westfjords Way route?" And my immediate reaction was, nah, this seems unrealistic and is probably going to be really expensive and almost impossible on my government salary. I talked with my wife, gave it some more consideration, then after a day or two, the YOLO Dylan won the internal argument. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity I just couldn't pass up. So I accepted, secured the time off work, navigated through the logistical planning process, and before I knew it, I was in Iceland.
Hey buddy.
Hi.
How you doing?
We made it.
Doing
running
great.
off 24 hours, no sleep, and caffeine. Now, Dana had been in Reykjavík for a week or so already for work obligations, and he greeted me at the bus station and helped me to settle in. He dumped Icelandic fun facts on me and gave me a tour of all the best coffee shops, pastry places, and hole-in-the-wall food grabs in the capital city. He described to me the proper etiquette when visiting the Icelandic geothermal pools, the reasoning behind the sulfur smell when I took a hot shower, and the proper way to pay your bill after a restaurant meal. I assembled my bike and spent a couple of days getting the lay of the land, visiting the local grocery stores, taking a food tour, and getting over the jet lag.
It doesn't have any kidneys. They essentially breathe out of the muscles and out of the skin. That is the ammonia you'll be smelling and tasting. It's a sharp pee.
There was only one logistical unknown that was still hanging out there: how the unboxed, completely assembled bikepacking rigs were going to travel by plane from the small Reykjavík domestic airport to the even smaller Ísafjörður airport so we could begin our 500-mile bikepacking journey. See, based on my preliminary research, we had some mixed information on this part. All official websites and online chats with Icelandic Air said the bikes need to be boxed for transport, but bikepacking.com and Instagram photos show you can simply wheel your bike onto the plane. This was something I definitely needed to check out in person. At the airport here, I just checked and they said, bring the bikes, no boxes. We do it all the time, as long as it's not an e-bike and has a big battery. They take the bikes from you. So I did my due diligence. We'll see tomorrow if they just wheel the bikes on. It's just so strange to me. I'm just having a hard time with this concept. Oddly, the Reykjavík domestic airport was a unique and satisfying experience on its own. The contrast between Phoenix Sky Harbor and Keflavik International Airport just days before, with their pesky security, customs officials, and bicycle-checked baggage fees.
Yeah, we got it. Did you hear me say? I said, be careful.
So weird. Not used to that. Yeah. Here at the domestic airport, gates 1 through 4 were a single room. Check-in was 45 minutes before the flight, and the baggage claim bumped up against their small concessions area. We did it. And it's Wednesday. Phase 3 complete. Bikes on the plane, boarded the plane. The lady yesterday was telling the truth, even though I haven't believed her until this moment. I just needed to let it go and trust the lady. Right? Trust the lady. Trust the lady. Trust the lady. We tried to get some shut-eye and contain our excitement on the short 45-minute flight to the northwesternmost portion of Iceland, where it's been said that the sheep outnumber people 20-1. I sat next to an older Icelandic lady and couldn't help but ponder what her life was like in this remote place, and how many generations her family may have raised sheep on a small farm. The landing was choppy and abrupt, only to be expected from a small prop plane. Welcome to Ísafjörður. Bikes arrived. We're in Isa. Seems with no problems. In the plane, a little bit of turbulence, but they're here. We're getting ready to depart and ride a little ways tonight. So it worked. They just put the bikes on the plane and then they just took them out. And I feel like I'm imagining it now. After gathering our wits, we headed into the small town of Isa to one of the few in-one gas stations open 24 hours in search of our final necessity, gas for my bikepacking stove. Without this, our combined 14 dehydrated meals would be pretty worthless, and a wrench would be thrown into our meticulous logistics. Since we budgeted 5 days for the 575-mile mixed pavement and gravel route, we opted to hit the road that evening around 7 p.m. and get a head start with our planned destination at designated campsites at mile 12 or 65. Bikepacking.com's camping information is a little mixed on dispersed camping rules in Iceland, and the route description states you must camp in designated areas in and around town, but also says there are plenty of roadside pullouts and viewpoints where camping isn't uncommon. So it's a little confusing. So as to not ruffle any feathers in a foreign country, Dana and I decided at this point to stay in designated campgrounds marked on our POIs. Well, this whole thing turned out to not be entirely true, but more on that later. Right past here, I took the first 12-mile camping spot, so we're gonna push on to 60-something miles with some climbing, just because neither of us are really tired, and that'll give us some extra time at the hotel tomorrow night, which will be nice with the hot springs. We were energized as the reality of the epic landscape started sinking in. We were surrounded by vast glacial canyons, treeless vistas, and endless amounts of waterfalls. Growing up in the arid Arizona desert and living most of my life in Flagstaff, where it seems water is a commodity worth more than gold, my programming was short-circuiting. There was a waterfall every 5 minutes. It was unreal. The first stretch on our journey took us in and out of 4 prominent fjords, each about 12 to 14 miles, and at the mouth of each fjord, a 5-minute boat ride straight across, as the crow flies, would save you an hour on the bike. This started to wear on my psyche as the hours ticked by, and you look across the fjord and say to yourself, I was right there like an hour ago. But the weather was good, and the clouds and the gray skies occasionally hit us with a slight misting. Riding bikes in a foreign country at midnight with the sun prominently in the sky. I had now checked this one off my bucket list. We rolled into what was marked as a designated camping POI on the route. We found our camp, mile 60-something-ish. It's beautiful. Check it out. This is where we're gonna stay. And there was a small group of locals huddled around a modest bonfire, enjoying some drinks. We chatted them up, and the owner of the nearby land gave us permission to make camp on a small grassy spot next to his restaurant. Then came the midges.
What's up, dude?
I'm braving these gnats for you. We made a quick camp and sought solace in our tents for the rest of the night.
Okay, so we put down like 64 miles. We got off the plane at 7:30 and did 64 miles, and it's about 1 a.m. now. Gave us a nice good head start, so I feel like it was a good success. And it's not raining, and life is good at the moment.
The next morning we woke up and tried to pack our things while dealing with the midges, and the local landowner guy we met was nice enough to let us into his restaurant early so we could have some relief. There are only a couple of intense breeding periods per year for these small non-biting flies, and we were in the middle of one. We hung out there and talked for a little while, and he told us that his father was the last of many generations of sheep farmers, and he started a tour guide company instead. He also started dropping David Goggins quotes on us out of nowhere, which was pretty awesome. We got rolling, and day 2 brought us whale watching opportunities and an easy 18-mile paddle across bridges guarded by what appeared to be the Icelandic version of scarecrows. We rolled into our first resupply for the day, Hotel Reykjavík, where there was a micro convenience store and a coffee opportunity by the hotel owner. In Iceland, these hotels are the only place to get a warm meal and bed for many desolate miles, and are usually frequented by international and national travelers on holiday. We fueled up on coffee, Coca-Cola, and ice cream before heading into the first prominent climb on the route. I don't think I'm gonna need any lights this whole trip. I brought one just because I'm like, I don't know, paranoid I guess. We were up till 1 a.m. last night and needed no lights. So I went from 2 batteries, 1 light, 1 headlamp, to 1 light, 1 battery, to like not needing anything. We turned inland and began the grinding 12-mile, 1,500-foot climb through the center of this region. In typical Dana fashion, he hammered up it and was energized when I met him sometime later at the top, a devious grin on his face. The descent was spectacular, fast, and incredibly scenic. Now I was energized. The route split us off onto a small lollipop loop, and another brief climb ended us at our reserved hotel logger hole and hot springs. Dana and I bought some more ice cream, soaked in the hot springs, and cooked our dehydrated meals to try and save some coin and lighten our loads. With my belly filled with dehydrated pad thai, we did our best at getting some shut-eye in our tiny locker room smelling overpriced room. Tell us the plan for today.
I'm gonna put my rain booties on. Thanks, Jesse. Then we're gonna ride to a town I can't pronounce. It's about 120 miles away. It's gonna rain most of the day. Well, it should be drizzle. Should be great.
And it has a grocery store, a campground, and an in-one gas station, and a restaurant. We woke early and tried to make the hotel breakfast efficient, with a goal to depart by 8:30 and put in a long day. Sneaking our bikes out the side door, we got rolling and hit our first gravel on the course.
All this wood is driftwood from Europe. Didn't come from the island.
Many of Iceland's main roads are gravel, and they're very well maintained with an average amount of traffic. This particular piece of gravel looped us out a fairly remote part of an already remote route and brought us into the town of Dragsnes. Fast, flowing pavement closed this loop for us, and we soon had arrived at our next resupply at mile 172.
They got an N1. N1, your favorite. They'll have coffee.
See, resupply in Iceland was proven to be more difficult than I originally expected, with convenience stores few and far between and very limited hours in the entire country. Most places opened at 8 or 10 a.m. and closed at 6 or 8 p.m., even in popular areas. I was quickly learning that Dana's secret weapon for hammering up these climbs is coffee and pastries. I don't know how the guy does it. It was impressive.
Size of that bird compared to these here sheep.
Heading back into a fjord, or as my mother says, a fjord?
Prior to this trip, I had what I call an Arizona rain jacket, which is basically an old, cheap REI rain jacket with holes in the elbows. It made do for AZ's infrequent storms, but for this trip, I wisely opted to upgrade to a Patagonia Torrent shell, sacrificing space and weight. I said under my breath, am I going to get all the way to Iceland and not use my rain jacket? And the universe heard me. The rain started, we geared up, and it only accelerated.
We finally got our rain jackets on, because it's finally raining, like real rain. Actually, it stopped raining. It's raining. We're officially in Iceland now.
We made a brief detour off route to find a warm coffee, Dana's request, and maybe a hot meal, but we only found a friendly Italian man at the dreary town of Boreri. 90 miles into the day, we pressed on, turning west.
Guess what? Gravel road ahead.
Soon to come was my first experience of real Icelandic wind and weather. This was the first of two frustrating low points for me. I tried to suppress the negative thoughts. I was at the furthest point away from the comfort of the start of the route, on an isolated island away from everything I knew, riding uphill on a bike that was too heavy, not aerodynamic, and geared wrong, getting passed by semi-trucks, and getting hammered for hours by wind and rain. In hindsight, while I sit in the comfort of my office chair writing this script, it's easy to say things like, you can't have the good without the bad, and trips that go perfect are never memorable. But I can't lie to you, there were a few moments on this 24-mile stretch where I was questioning my life decisions.
2.5 hours later, still raining like crazy.
My intrusive thoughts were compounded by the fact that I probably wasn't going to make it to the N1 gas station in time for any relief from the weather. I rolled in 8 minutes after close and met back up with Dana, a thoughtful friend who handed me an Appleton orange drink, which pulled me out of my funk for a minute. I just sat there and said to him, "Dana, I just need a minute." Luckily, the campground was across the street from the N1, so we made a quick camp, tried to keep our sleeping bags as dry as possible when everything else was soaked. And the metaphorical sun came out when we found a drier and heated indoor cooking and eating area at the campground. The wind and rain battered my slightly collapsed tent all night, but I was dry.
That was a long day, but it's windy and rainy. That was a 120-mile day. Good morning. That was a long night. It was windy. Very windy. Floppy. It's a little calmer this morning, so...
Day 4 brought a new day. The weather cleared, the sun and ocean breeze helped to dry our gear before stuffing it back into our bikepacking bags. The day greeted us with smooth gravel, warm sun, an amazing tailwind, and breathtaking snowy mountains off in the distance.
Some trees, haven't seen those in a while. Wow.
A bench in a small clearing called our name and we cooked up some more food, taking in the sun for a minute while I stretched out the second day soreness from my legs. The 8 or so years of my cycling career have been almost all on flat bar mountain bikes, and I'm not much of a road rider, so there were all kinds of new aches and pains to stretch out.
Okay guys, here's my lunch. Picnic. Pepperoni taco. Pepperoni, ham and cheese, taco style. What does that mean? Not exactly sure what taco style means. Do you know what taco style means? Maybe it's the sauce?
As we rounded the corner on this 50-mile peninsula, our tailwind turned to a fierce headwind, and I slogged to keep Dana in my field of view.
Don't see that every day in Iceland. It's a GMC 4-door pickup, old.
Finally, we arrived at our next stop, Gil's Guest House and Restaurant at mile 320. A black lab came to greet me as the owner, I'm assuming Gil, took our food order and chatted us up. Dana curiously asked about the camping restrictions, and Gil, as an ex-police officer, explained that one of Iceland's oldest laws is freedom for dispersed camping. We did some Google cross-referencing with what Gil told us, and the difference is if you're in a tent versus a vehicle. If you're in a tent, you're still allowed to camp anywhere you want for one night, with exception to private property or in somebody's front yard. But if you're in a vehicle, you have to camp in designated camping spots. The ability to pull over anytime dramatically changed our strategy and eased a little of my anxiety to try and ride too fast outside of my capabilities. Long bridges, steep climbs, and more magnificent views followed as the clouds once again rolled in and the rain gear went back home.
Back in rain gear.
The views on this day were my favorite of the entire route. After the previous day's wet experience, we agreed to make camp the moment there was 1, a break in the rain, and 2, a nice pullout with a flat spot.
This has got to be like a classic Icelandic prank or something. I was going to stake my tent, and I found this beautiful black rock, and I went to go grab it, and then the black rock turned squishy because it was sheep turds. But you know what? After yesterday, it didn't really faze me for like a second. It's all about perspective, I guess.
Today was decision day.
What's up, dog?
With 214 miles remaining and 2 full days until our domestic flight back to Reykjavík, there was a ticking clock weighing on my mind. I'd been moving slower each day, and the 6 largest climbs on the route remained. Dana and I agreed to ride into Flokalundur at mile 407 and make a decision. We were both leaning on the idea of taking a shortcut up Road 60, which would cut off about 76 miles. Doing this would give us ample time to get back into Isa and prep for our flight back to the capital city, and also allow for a continued leisurely pace, extra time in camp, and a bonus stop at a hot pot or two. The downsides were lost scenic opportunities and a fairly substantial resupply.
First big climb of the day. Going up over there into that path. Get my legs warmed up. You know, waking them up. Hands are going a little numb today. Not sure why, but they're numb. Seem to be better without the gloves.
We unofficially opted to take the shortcut when we hit the Helulog hot pot just before the resupply village. The oceanside, natural-fed hot spring felt amazing, and we had it all to ourselves. Cross this one off the life bucket list. We then made our decision official over lunch at the hotel restaurant, where we navigated around the German tourists which had just arrived from a giant tour bus. We were able to get our order in the kitchen before they became overwhelmed. With only a few dehydrated meals remaining and questionable resupply options for the last 100 miles, we loaded up with the most expensive standard burger, pizza, and soup I've ever purchased.
Sweet!
We kicked off our shortcut with a climb which brought us into a grassless, barren landscape where the wind was whipping and the snow never melts. I'm sure I was planted in the middle of a giant volcanic cinder cone. At least this is what it felt like. It was apparent all around the land had been carved away by glacial and volcanic activity. The distant snowing peaks were feeding large rivers under our feet as we descended the other side. It revealed one of the most iconic and visited waterfalls in Iceland, Dynjandi Falls. I had seen so many waterfalls on this trip, I was honestly getting a little sick of them. They all started to look the same until we rolled up on Dynjandi. It was the big leagues of Icelandic waterfalls. Dana took a hike up to get some close-up shots of the falls, while I watched the bikes, ate a slice of pizza, stretched the legs, and made a coffee.
We are headed out on the last big peninsula, trying to find a flat spot that's not windy.
The quality of the road began to degrade, and we crossed our first bridgeless water crossing. The intel on this section warned about terrible roads and the possibility of high tides making certain sections impassable. But this was a problem for the next day.
We found our campsite for the night. Look at how nice the soft grass looks. We can make this work. There's a volcano in the background.
Mordor.
Mordos.
This was it, the final day. The get home gear kicks in, and the thought of a huge warm meal, soft bed, and established shelter gets me motivated. I knew today was likely going to be the hardest day en route, with unknown road conditions, and the largest climb is the finale. Right out the gate, our feet got soaked with ice-cold water. My waterproof socks kept the water out, but the cold really started to wear me down. The landscape turned from green fields with quaint farms to forsaken cinder cones. Isolation really started setting in as we rode closer to the beach. The road quality degraded significantly, and the vehicles were non-existent. Everything was wet. The sky was wet, the rocks were wet, all my shit was wet. The open ocean to our left billowed with huge white caps, and it felt like it could swallow me up. This reminded me of a scene from Deadliest Catch on the Bering Sea. The Greenland Sea was a brutal, cold, unforgiving ocean. This was my second lowest point en route. Although Dana was still zooming ahead of me and riding most of the nasty chunky road, I could see the wear in his face. We were both swollen, tired, and wind-beaten from this beautiful but extremely harsh place. I managed to muster the energy for a final tripod shot as the low tide allowed us to pass.
It's slow. I'm ready to be around the peninsula. It's taking a while. I think my legs are pretty done, like done. I'm trying to keep a little bit left in the tank to keep pedaling instead of walking, but
we began to pull away from the shoreline and pass houses and farms. The road was still garbage, and these residents are a tough bunch living all the way out here. As we rolled on, the road quality got a little better every mile, and we began to see signs of tourist activity in vehicles, eventually hitting the eccentric town of Fingri at mile 471. Here we sheltered inside a local cafe and chowed down on croissants and Belgian waffles while the high school-age workers sat in awe at how much food we were consuming. Dana even asked them, "You get a lot of cyclists here?" And they said, "Yeah, we get a good amount of cyclists." And he said, "Do they eat a lot of food when they come by?" And the two kids looked at us and said, "Not as much as you guys." You spend 6 days in this close of proximity to someone, and on the last day you run out of things to talk about. You both know that all that's left is the final push, and this adventure, this moment in time, will be over, and will likely never return. I have extremely mixed emotions during moments like this. I want to get home and return to my life routine, but I know I'll look back at these adventures with admiration and nostalgia.
Dana just said to me, prepare for side mouth breathing because of this wind that's coming. That was an amazing stop though.
Fantastic tailwind carried us down the road. Then we flipped directions. We cut across the landscape, and as Dana pulled ahead, I noticed a local dog actively pursuing him up the road. The dog caught up with him and said hi, and then came back to greet me. Our furry friend had a slight limp, but could still get on the gas and hung with me for miles all the way up to the top of the ascent. This dog definitely knew what he was doing as he checked the road before crossing, making sure to dodge locals and tour buses alike. In my fragile emotional state, it's like this dog was towing us in. I felt a moment of sadness when I started to descend, and my new buddy was trying his hardest to keep up with me, but he just couldn't. Instead of going through the newly constructed tunnel back into Isa, this bikepacking route took us on one final epic climb up and over the mountain pass on the original 2-track road into town. We ascended into the mist. For the first time on this trip, ideas of sorcery and witchcraft crept up my spine.
Dude, this is nuts. This is so bananas. Have you looked over the edge? Yeah. I'm at the summit of this thing, and the wind's blowing 1,000 miles an hour. And I can smell Dana's fart from like 6 feet away. I don't know how that works. Somebody please explain. We made it to the summit though. Now we go down.
Down we went for what seemed like an eternity. Our hands and feet were frozen. The cold added to Dana's hand injury he'd been nursing from a slow motion crash on the way up the summit.
That's it, we finished it. Dana's hands are wrecked, but we finished it. And it's really cold. My hands are really cold. I'm ready for a warm everything. But we're back in Isa, and it was a great trip. And it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thanks, Dana, for inviting me. Amazing.
Finally making it back into town and bringing this trip full circle by stopping off at the local Bonus grocery store in search of, you guessed it, a warm cup of coffee and a pastry. Our breathtaking cycling adventure was over, but our logistical travel challenges were just beginning again. I'm deeply honored that Dana asked me to be a part of his Icelandic bikepacking journey. Thanks, Dana, and here's to many more epic bikepacking adventures.
Lucky me, I found the only 5 trees in Iceland to take a poopy in.
Wipe your ass. Look at it, it's pooping right now. Clean it up. Look how clean the other ones are.
Raider has your bicycles. Bra, adashiado.
Hey, what do you do if you get lost in Icelandic forest?
What, Dana?
Stand up.